A major merger proposed for the auto industry.
A historic pivot for Japan's auto industry is underway. Honda and Nissan announced on Monday that they have started talks towards a potential merger.
And it will catapult the two companies to the top of the industry.
It's going to create, at least in terms of sales, it will create the third largest automotive company in the world. So it is some big news.
Today is Monday, December 23rd, and this is The Issue from VOA. I'm Scott Walterman. Lori is off today. Honda and Nissan announced Monday they've started talks toward a potential merger, a historic pivot for Japan's auto industry that underlines the threat that Chinese electric vehicle makers now pose to some of the world's best-known car makers. An overview from Reuters correspondent Sierra Lee.
The integration would create the world's third largest auto group by vehicle sales after Toyota and Volkswagen, and would also give Nissan and Honda a chance to share resources in the face of intense competition. The companies also announced that smaller Mitsubishi, in which Nissan is top shareholder, was also considering joining. The chief executives of all three held a press conference in Tokyo. Honda CEO Toshihiro Mibe.
There is a rise of Chinese power and emerging forces, and the structure of the automobile industry is changing. What this means is that I believe that the value itself in terms of automobiles and mobility will change. Ultimately, we would like to lead the world once again. And you can think that today's discussion is the first step in consideration towards that direction.
Honda is Japan's second largest automaker and Nissan is its number 3. A deal would mark the biggest reshaping in the global auto industry since Fiat Chrysler and PSA merged in 2021 to create Stellantis. The two companies said they'd aim to wrap up talks around June 2025 and then set up a holding company by August 2026. Honda has a market capitalization of more than $40 billion, while Nissan is valued at about $10 billion. Honda said it will appoint the majority of the holding company's board. In a separate online press conference with the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan on Monday, former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn gave his reaction to the news. He said he did not believe the Honda-Nissan alliance would be successful and that the two automakers were not complementary. Ghosn is wanted as a fugitive in Japan for jumping bail and fleeing to Lebanon. His 2018 arrest for financial wrongdoing threw Nissan into crisis.
That's Reuters correspondent Sierra Lee reporting. Now, these are two giant names in the auto industry. Honda, founded in 1946, and Nissan, which was once known as Datsun, goes all the way back to 1914. But it's a brave new world. And it appears to be an adapt or die situation for these two companies as the world slides towards electric cars and China becomes a major global automaker. Let's find out more about all of this. Joining us now is Berk Talay, professor of marketing at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Well, thank you so very much for being able to take the time to talk to us.
Oh, yes, of course. It's a pleasure.
So this is a big deal, it seems to me. These are two major players, Honda and Nissan, coming together. Hopefully they say they want to merge.
Yes, indeed. It looks like a very important merger. As you might have read elsewhere, it's going to create, at least in terms of sales, it will create the third largest automotive company in the world. So it is some big news.
These are major players, Nissan and Honda, as standalone companies. What are the reasons that they want to merge?
We can talk about a variety of reasons, but I would also highlight the fact that, yes, both Nissan and Honda, these are major players, and they have been major players in the global automotive industry. But in the last few years, both of them, and especially Nissan, has been suffering quite a bit. So, yes, they are well known, but when you look at the trends, let's say, they haven't been doing spectacularly well. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, I believe the second part of your question was, like the outcome of this merger, right? What should we expect?
Yes.
So, the outcome of this merger, of course, there's always positive outcomes and negative outcomes for those companies and for consumers. So, maybe we are looking at a 2x2 matrix here. On the one side, we have the customers. On the other side, we have the merging companies, and we have the good and bad outcomes for each of them. For these companies, we should expect some kind of an economies of scale in terms of the variety aspects of their operations, in terms of R&D, in terms of other marketing activities, like promoting the cars, distribution of the cars, after-sales service and everything. So there's going to be some economies of scale, bargaining power among their suppliers, and so on and so forth, and their distributors as well. For customers, we would assume that if this merger increases the competition in the automotive industry, as customers, as consumers, we are likely to see better cars, both from this new entity and also from their competitors as well. Better cars, and probably they will come at a better price, at a better cost for us. So these are all the good things that we might expect. Of course, for these companies, merger of these two large companies will have its challenges in variety of ways, and these companies have different cultures. For instance, they have different ways of doing business, so this might decrease the efficiency of their operations. And there's the Renault issue. Renault is a partner. Renault has stake. The French automaker has stake in Nissan. So it might have a good impact or a bad impact. And in general, when we look at the mergers in the automotive industry, by and large, they don't end up really well for the partners.
Well, we saw a struggle when Mercedes tried to take over the American automaker Dodge, which wound up being spun off and then bought by the Italian company, which seems to have taken hold. But that was an example of two cultures, I assume, that just didn't mesh.
Yeah, exactly. And when you look at the history of the automotive industry, these type of failures are not really rare. You might also remember the Renault AMC alliance when Renault gained some stake in the company AMC, American Motor Company, and then they weren't successful, so Renault withdrew from the U.S. market. So automotives. I always say this to everyone. Every now and then I have a chance to talk about the automotive industry with, with journalists or with other people in the industry. Automotive industry is a very, very complex, highly complex industry. And, companies are usually very large companies, and, their operations are incredibly complex. Routine task is very challenging in this industry. And add to this very intense competition, and add to this, like the elephant in the room, a major shift on the market from ICE engines, internal combustion engines, to electric vehicles. And, on top of that, when you add all of these factors together, it's a very tough industry to operate in general.
Well, it seems that one of the drivers of this merger is the emerging electric vehicle market, and they say they're getting pounded by Chinese EVs and companies like Tesla, which are moving into their markets.
Yes, that is correct. And, when you look at the recent history of the automotive industry, actually the Japanese manufacturers were among the first to enter into the electric vehicle market. right? Nissan Leaf has been on the market for a long time, just as an example. But for one reason or another, I mean, we can give various reasons. The Japanese manufacturers, by and large, they couldn't basically compete with the Chinese manufacturers because China manufacturers in collaboration and the encouragement of the government through lots of subsidies, they have made massive investments in the electric vehicle market. So there were at some point so many Chinese automotive EV manufacturers, and some of them were successful. They survived the intense competition within the market, and now they have become global players like BYD. So on the one hand, Chinese manufacturers basically, China has been successful in transitioning into electric vehicle market. United States, the legacy manufacturers have not been successful so far. We cannot really say that, but Tesla has been doing an incredible job. So, that leaves European and Japanese manufacturers. And Europe is doing, they are not particularly successful, but there have been some investments there as well. One of the advantages of the European manufacturers is the European Union. So, they have a larger pseudo-local market. Whereas in Japan, local market is relatively small. Japanese manufacturers, they don't really have a strong local market, so they are more export dependent.
So if somebody's encroaching on their territory, like Tesla, like the Chinese EVs, that's problematic for Toyota and Nissan and Honda and Mitsubishi, you're saying?
Yes, exactly. That's kind of like the problem. It is not like Japanese manufacturers have not been doing anything in the EV area or alternative fuels. They have invested quite a bit in the hydrogen powered engines, and but so far it hasn't. Their attempts have not been successful. Have not caught on. So basically, for one reason or another, Japanese manufacturers have been lagging behind in this EV market.
Do you think we're going to see more of this in the global automotive marketplace as we continue to transition away from fossil fuels?
Yes, exactly. That's
and global markets, right? It's a twofold. It's not just the technology that's changing. It is the global economy that's changing, isn't it?
Let me just ask you, what do you mean by global economy in this?
So fewer and fewer companies in multiple industries. There were fewer airlines. There were fewer computer companies. There were fewer telecom companies. As the world economy contracts geographically, competition is thinning. Actually,
you have made an excellent point. But when we look at the history of competition in different industries, we see certain trends. Okay, by and large, we can divide the competition into two phases. One is, let's say, the evolution of competition in industry into two phases: legitimation phase and competition phase. This is kind of like an academic view, but legitimation and competition phases are two distinct phases in the evolution of industries. The legitimation phase is where we have a new industry. Okay, new industry is born. There are no set, let's say, laws, regulations, or even set criteria for customer demand or industry demand. Okay, it's kind of like Wild West. Okay, so there are lots of manufacturers, hundreds of manufacturers in some cases, doing things their own way in the initial stages of an industry. But over time, one of those ways of doing things catches on. And then over time, it becomes the industry standard. Many of the companies that do not follow that way of doing things, they go bankrupt or they are acquired. So there's a decline in the number of competitors on the market. And this trend applies to many industries. not only the automotive industry or anything. It applies to a wide variety of industries. And once that industry is established, legitimized in that, as the name of the evolution goes, starts the competition phase where we have much fewer companies. The standards are all determined for now, for a given time anyway. So the companies compete on gaining efficiencies. Everything. So and over time there is some radical innovation which completely changes the dynamics, and then there's let's say another legitimation phase starts. So it's there's a disruption to a radical innovation. Let's say. I don't want to get too technical, but we see this in all of the industries. When I think about the competition between, let's say, earlier automotive manufacturers, it was the same thing. There were like hundreds of manufacturers in the US alone in the 1800s. But over time, most of them failed, and we have just less than a handful of manufacturers now.
Well, we used to refer to it as the big three, General
Yes.
Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, yeah.
Yeah, so this is very common. And now in the automotive industry, we are seeing this shift. Although I wouldn't, I would be a little bit more careful with the timing of this shift. The shift to the electric vehicles is likely to happen, but maybe not in the next few years. The way I see it anyway. We need some more, let's say, innovations in the battery technology, and also, the people will need to be more trained in terms of fixing these cars when they break down and everything. So
well, pricing
we have
too, right? The price has to come down, or is coming down, and that's part of a new technology curve too, isn't it? The first cell phones were expensive. Now they're, everybody has one. First automobiles were expensive.
Exactly.
Now everybody has two.
Yes, exactly. Excellent point. Excellent. But it will take time, right? It will happen. It will take time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Very interesting. And Berk Talay, a professor of marketing at the University of Massachusetts, Lowell. At this point, the merger is just a proposal. The two have agreed to work together more closely and try to get to that end. This has been The Issue from the Voice of America. On behalf of everyone at VOA, thank you so much for joining us. You can follow The Issue and comment on X, Blue Sky, and Facebook at VOA The Issue. And for news 24/7 on our website, voanews.com. In Washington, I'm Scott Walterman.